Boy, do we have a great show today. But first, I know you guys are liking these giveaways, and this time it's going to be the best one yet. Are you ready? For this giveaway, I want to invite you to join me for dinner at one of my favorite restaurants. That's right, you heard me right. Fine dining with the great Eldersky. We can talk about anything you want, and I'll answer all your questions. Well, mostly all your questions. It'll be a great time for sure, so hurry up and go to winlarry.com to sign up. I'll be announcing the winner live on February 22nd, so make sure to stay tuned. And last but not least, a big thank you to everybody who joined the giveaway for this mug. You better use it every time you watch my show. Now for today's episode. Racializing the death of a black man by the police. It became national, indeed international news that 5 Memphis police officers grabbed, beat, punched, pepper sprayed, and tased a black suspect named Tyree Nichols, who later died at the hospital. A picture of him in his hospital bed showing his swollen, battered, and bloodied face went viral on social media. Nobody but nobody is justifying this beatdown of a slender suspect at the hands of 5 rather burly police officers. Nobody. Ben Crump, who has become the go-to attorney in instances of allegations of police brutality, says this is clearly an example of anti-black and anti-brown police misconduct.
The prayer that I believe Ms. Wells is articulating is that this won't have to happen to other young black and brown children. We don't have to learn so many hashtags down limit. I don't have to keep talking to you on CNN week after every other week about yet another unarmed black person has been killed by police in a highly controversial manner. Hopefully, this institutional police culture that says it's okay to engage in excessive force against black and brown people will finally be dealt with. We won't continue to try to say that, oh, it's training. They can de-escalate just fine when it's white citizens. We see that all the time, but it's when it's black and brown citizens, no matter if the police are black, Hispanic, or white, they seem to do the most down limit. And so this is the blueprint from now. You know, Memphis Police Department terminated them immediately. The DA brought charges within 20 days. Now, when it's not black officers, we want to see the same type of justice.
Mm-hmm. Really? So this is about anti-black, anti-brown police brutality? Is that true? Now, the city police chief, a black female, said she was disgusted.
Well, I expected serious charges. I really did. Actually, the charges that were placed, or at least the administrative charges, were probably the most severe that I've seen in my career. But they were absolutely appropriate, and I knew that the next step would be in the hands of the DA's office, so I am not surprised.
The cops were all fired, all faced second-degree murder charges, and Mr. Crump, on behalf of Tyree Nichols' family, has filed a $50 million civil suit. The body cam video, as well as video from an outdoor camera, have been released. Apparently, no video exists of the traffic stop at the beginning of Nichols' encounter with the police.
Get on the ground! Get on the ground! Okay. I'm tase y'all. All right, I'm on the ground. Lay down! Lay down! Yes, sir. Lay down! Please tase me. I'm going to tase you! Get on the ground! Lay down! One! Now! I'm tasing. All right, okay, all right.
The video goes on to show officers eventually used a taser on Nichols. He then ran from the officers. The police department released 4 different videos. Another video shows the scene playing out from a street camera. From that perspective, you can see the officers punching and kicking him. In some of the videos, you actually hear Nichols yell for his mother. Nichols' mom spoke about the incident earlier today, where she expressed heartache.
No mother should go through what I'm going through right now.
Nichols' mom, at a press conference arranged by Mr. Crump, said, "I hate the fact that us as black people, we're out here killing each other. I don't know why."
I hate the fact that us as black people, we're out here killing each other.
That's right.
For what? I don't know why.
That's right. The 5 cops facing charges of second-degree murder are all black. But not to worry, it still did not take long for Democrats and the Democrat media to racialize the issue. Few things are more creative than a Democrat playing the race card. Barack and Michelle Obama called this a quote-unquote painful reminder of America's cop problem. The new mayor of LA, a black female, said in an interview, even with the black officers, I wonder how they would have reacted if this was a young white person.
And I'm curious, what do you make of the fact that the officers who did this were all black?
Well, I think that many of the incidences we have seen have had a racial motive to them. Obviously, this did not. But even with the black officers, I wonder how they would have reacted if it was a young white person. And so, we have a problem with policing in our country. Many, many times it's racial, but not always. And you will have African Americans that will tell you pretty frequently that sometimes they have difficulty, regardless of the race of the officer, that it is a problem that is fundamental to policing in America.
Note the white reporter did not push back, raised no objections. Watch again.
And I'm curious, what do you make of the fact that the officers who did this were all black?
Well, I think that many of the incidences we have seen have had a racial motive to them. Obviously, this did not. But even with the black officers, I wonder how they would have reacted if it was a young white person. And so, we have a problem with policing in our country. Many, many times it's racial, but not always. And you will have African Americans that will tell you pretty frequently that sometimes they have difficulty, regardless of the race of the officer, that it is a problem that is fundamental to policing in America.
By not pushing back, by not raising any objections, this makes the quote-unquote journalist and his media colleagues part of the problem by allowing such incendiary comments to go unchecked. Now, playing from the same sheet music, Reverend Al said, Tyree Nichols' death is an outrage and race is still involved.
This is an outrage. And race still is involved, Joe, as you and I spoke about on the phone. Because I don't believe those 5 cops would have done that to a young white on a traffic stop.
CNN's Van Jones said that despite the fact that the cops are black, there might still have been driven by racism.
There's this very simplistic notion that says, well, if a white cop is doing something to an unarmed black person, then that's racism. But we sometimes forget, unfortunately, African Americans can also be guilty of hatred and bias and bigotry against other African Americans. Sometimes you go into a store that's owned by an African American, they're nice to the white folks and suspicious of you. It's not that only one group can harbor anti-black bias. It's so pervasive. And so the other thing that happens is certain neighborhoods are just considered almost by some police departments war zones. Anything goes over there. Just do what you have to do. And so black officers can pick up on those kinds of cues, those kinds of signals when nobody gets in trouble for acting a certain way in this neighborhood versus in a white neighborhood. So race is an element here. I can't imagine any police officers delivering that kind of brutal beating to a white male U.S. citizen. Can you imagine if you had 5 black officers doing that? It's very hard to imagine. I think what has happened is we've become accustomed, black and white officers, to a certain amount of inhumanity being directed in certain neighborhoods with certain suspects, and you saw that play out today.
President Biden, in speaking with the family of Tyree Nichols, offered his condolences with a little lie added for effect.
On your comments today were moving. I don't know how you did it with Rodney. I know Tyree's dad is devastating. Yes, sir. I know people say that to you, but I do know. I lost my son in a war, the consequences of the war in Iraq being there a year. I lost my daughter when a tractor trailer broadsided and killed my wife and daughter. And I don't know how you stood there. I didn't have the courage to do what you did.
Now for some facts. It is rare for cops to kill anybody, much less an unarmed black person. The police have killed an average of 1,000 people over the last 5 years, mostly with guns. This is a population of 350 million people, over 60 million annual civilian police contacts. In a population of 350 million, that's 0.0002% killed by cops. In Chicago alone, during the weekend ending January 23, 30 people were shot, 7 fatally. And the homicide rate in St. Louis and Baltimore is 3 times that of Chicago. But let's not talk about that. A former Thomson Reuters data scientist, more on him later, found over the past 5 years, the police have killed 39% more unarmed whites than unarmed blacks. And the raw stats suggest that there is actually a slight anti-white bias in police applications of deadly force. In 2020, cops shot and killed 457 whites, 24 were unarmed, and they shot and killed 243 blacks, 18 were unarmed. So again, the police are killing more whites and killing more unarmed whites. Yet, what did Obama say about the unarmed whites? Exactly. Well, despite the U.S. blowing right through the $31.4 trillion debt ceiling in January, the leftist White House still refuses to reduce spending. While our national leadership has buried their heads in the sand when it comes to fiscal responsibility, it is time to pull yours out. Now would be a great time to diversify into gold with Birch Gold. In times of high uncertainty and instability, gold is king. It's dependable. Birch Gold makes it easy to convert an IRA or 401k into an IRA in precious metals. Here's what you need to do. Visit LarryForGold.com to claim your free info kit on gold and then talk to one of their precious metal specialists. Think about this. To dig our country out of this mountain of debt, every single taxpayer in America would have to write a check for $247,000, and it's only getting worse. Protect yourself with gold today by visiting LarryForGold.com. With an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau, thousands of happy customers, and countless 5-star reviews, you can trust Birch Gold to protect your future. Visit LarryForGold.com today. That's LarryForGold.com right now. In 2019, according to the Washington Post database, the police killed 12 unarmed black men. But according to a poll in PoliceMag.com, of those who self-describe as very liberal, 50% thought the police killed 1,000 unarmed black men. Of those who self-described as liberals, 39% put the number at 1,000. Now, studies going back decades, including one done by a black Harvard economics professor named Roland Fryer, discussed in a July 2016 front page article in the New York Times, he found cops were more hesitant, more reluctant to use deadly force against a black suspect than a white one. In April 2016, a Washington Post article wrote, and I'm quoting, "Officers are 3 times less likely to shoot unarmed black suspects than unarmed white suspects," end of quote. And a paper called Black Lives Matter spreads falsehoods that have led to murders of thousands of black people in the most disadvantaged communities. The aforementioned Harvard-educated data scientist, Thomson Reuters former data scientist named Isaac Kriegman, he was fired because of his politically incorrect findings. He talked about what he calls the Ferguson effect on policing. This refers to the phenomenon of cops, in fear of false allegations of systemic racism, refusing to engage in proactive policing. This, he argues, has resulted in thousands of what he called excess deaths, mostly black people, who otherwise would be alive if policing had not gone passive. Kriegman writes, "As police were demonized with falsehoods, their morale declined and their willingness to engage in proactive policing, such as street stops for suspicious behaviors and other forms of policing designed to prevent firearms crimes, plummeted. Police officers reported that they were scared or unwilling to confront suspects because any confrontation could escalate into a situation where they would need to use force. Any such situation could then turn into a media circus where they would be scapegoated, their careers would be ended, their friends and community would cut off ties with them, and possibly where they would even be wrongfully convicted and imprisoned," end of quote. Even hard left Mark Lamont Hill, in an interview with Candace Owens, conceded that the data do not show that the police are using deadly force disproportionately against blacks just because they're black. Heather McDonald, author of the book War on Cops, How the New Attack on Law and Order makes everyone less safe, she says this: "A police officer is 18.5 times more likely to be killed by a black man than an unarmed black man to be killed by a police officer." She also notes this. Blacks between the ages of 10 and 34 die from homicide at 13 times the rate of white Americans, according to researchers at the CDC and the DOJ. Almost always the young black male's murderer is another young black male. This is why the cops are there. This explains the so-called disproportionate police interaction with blacks. Now, this Columbia law professor, a proponent of critical race theory, surprise, surprise, explains why these black cops acted the way they did.
It shouldn't be a surprise to people that individual black people can actually do anti-black things. Anyone who knows the history of enslavement, anyone who knows the history of policing knows that black people can do anti-black things. But what we were also trying to bring into the conversation is the structural dimension of anti-black racism. The fact that the incentive structures that are set up in policing are targeting particular communities, black communities. One cannot imagine this happening in a well-heeled white community. That is a racial problem that the law has consistently said is a non-problem. We add to that the fact that Fourth Amendment law has facilitated precisely this kind of overexposure to policing. When black people put their hands at 10 and 2 o'clock position, when they see those lights in their rearview mirror, it's because the Supreme Court has allowed police officers to pull us over for minor traffic infractions, even made-up infractions. Yeah. And because of this overexposure to police encounters, we are overexposed to lethality at the hands of police. This is what critical race theory brings to the table in understanding structural racism.
Is it an anti-black thing that blacks commit half of the nation's homicides and shootings? And almost all of the victims, again, are also black? Are blacks engaging in an anti-black thing when in the nation's 75 most populous counties, blacks account for 60% of the robberies and shootings? Professor, this is why the police, as you put it, are targeting black communities. The police go where the crime is. Would the professor prefer police deploy the same amount of manpower in Beverly Hills, Malibu, or Martha's Vineyard? And by the way, 81% of blacks want police manpower to remain the same or to be even increased. We need less claptrap about systemic racism and more attention to the top problem in the black community, fatherless homes. By the way, I'm curious, did the Memphis PD lower standards to hire these black cops for diversity and or because cops are now maligned as systemically racist, resulting in early retirements, fewer applicants, and therefore the need to lower hiring standards to maintain sufficient manpower? To recap, if white cops had beaten Nichols, that would have been called systemic racism. Black cops did beat him, and it's still called systemic racism. It raises the question, why then does the left want a diverse police force? Bad cops come in all colors. Shouldn't the goal be real simple? Good cops, no matter the race? And there is a sad, tragic through line in almost all of these dead black suspect police encounter cases. Resisting arrest. Why is it taboo for black leaders and blacks in the media like Barack and Michelle Obama, the mayor of LA, MSNBC Al Sharpton, CNN's Van Jones, etc., to encourage black suspects not to resist arrest? Why the no-fly zone over saying that? Again, the data show the Biden and Dems' big lie about supposed anti-black police systemic racism gets blacks killed. This means, due to this baseless anti-cop rhetoric, Biden and the Dems and the media all have blood on their hands. And that's the elder statement. When we come back, California's high energy costs. Who's to blame? Be sure to hit that like button, hit subscribe, and scroll down and join our mailing list because, believe it or not, from time to time, YouTube, for whatever reason, has issues with our vids. To make sure you don't miss any of our videos, get on our mailing list. And you see that big donate button? Hit that, throw a little something in the tip jar. Make sure that we can continue to give you hard-hitting, honest programming. Remember, LarryWithEpoch.com, LarryWithEpoch.com.